So today's discussion's about home fix-up operations. We appreciate the opportunity to kind of to spend some time with you here during the wrap session here. Obviously, in the world of emergency management, we spend a little bit of time talking about emergency preparedness. Now, I had some training here with sheriff's deputies and a little bit picture of emergency management and how, as response agencies, we kind of fit within that picture. But today's focus is going to be different. We're going to be looking at the concept of emergency preparedness. And as we do that, we need to kind of put ourselves in the what-if mode. Now, in the first responder world, we kind of hopefully live in what-ifs. As we're making that approach on that car that we've just made a traffic stop on, we kind of go through the what-ifs. If all of a sudden a bad guy steps out and starts shooting, if we're a firefighter, if we get into this burning building and something goes sideways, we do the what-ifs and so forth. In our daily lives, each of us should be doing a little bit of this. You're driving down the road, maybe heading across country, and you see some big 18-wheeler coming at you on a 2-lane highway. You ever play the what-if game? What if all of a sudden I see this guy drift across my lane, right? So we should be doing what-ifs. I think all of us have been in those situations where you've seen people live right here in their life, and there is no concept of what-if. Those are the people that you go through and they're blocking miles, and they're totally anything else that anybody else is doing, right? We've seen those. So the idea, though, is that we need to expand our perception a little bit in which we live, and what are the things that can go wrong. And it could be the simple day-to-day stuff, it could be more complex stuff, and it can be really big stuff. Let's talk about some of those things here. So I want you to do some thinking here. What's your mindset? Where does your thoughts go? What is your priorities as the situation occurs? We're sitting here on a nice summer day. Okay? It's your day off. You're there with the family. You're in the backyard chilling. Here you got your lemonade in your hand and you got your feet in the wading pool, whatever. You're just kind of sitting there chilling out. Kids or grandkids are all playing out in the yard. And everybody just having a good leisurely time. All right? And all of a sudden, now when we think about the world of emergency preparedness and so forth, what's the big one that we're all waiting to happen here in Utah? The earthquake, okay? So let's just play that scenario right now. In the middle of this situation, all of a sudden the big earthquake happens. Things start shaking and rumbling. Windows started bopping out of houses. We might start to see some structures fall. The power to the radio that you had, or you was listening to some tunes or whatever, that all went dead. And, everything finishes getting done shaking. Smoke and dust throughout the community. What's your thoughts? Think about this. What are your immediate concerns?
Gas, fire.
Okay. We've got gas. We've got the potential for fire. Okay. What else? What else is here over here? What's your immediate concerns? Who are you going to be checking on? Where's my family? Okay, where's all the kids at? Everybody accounted for, right? And that's first where our thoughts typically are going to go. We're going to do an inventory of our family, see how things are going. Then from there we start looking at additional things. Geez, do we have a gas leak? Do we have a fire? What does my house look like? What does my neighbor's house look like? I live in a house that was built in 1893, okay, adobe bricks. I don't expect that it's going to stand very well. I hope it doesn't happen at 3 o'clock in the morning because I might be underneath the pile, right? So that's the thing that we look at. So you need to start assessing, what are your immediate concerns? What are your long-term concerns in this situation? Concerns.
Food.
Okay, food, shelter, water, okay, so all those basics and so forth. And if you can't provide that for your family, how do you feel? Vulnerable, okay? I mean, you think about that, it comes down to, as far as our tasks and our responsibilities in life, my first and foremost priority is to make sure my family is taken care of, okay? And so, both short-term and long-term. So then we ask the question, do you have a family emergency preparedness plan and supplies? Okay? I'm going to throw that out there. We're going to talk a little bit later about what that may look like. And this isn't going to be a class of how to put together your emergency 72-hour kit, but I'm going to take you to some places and show you where and how that you can do that. Now, let's do another scenario. Rainy, snowy day. You are at work, wherever that may be, as far or wide as that may be. Your family is all scattered at work or at school, daycare, okay? And there's a big earthquake. A little bit different, okay? We ask ourselves the same questions. What are your immediate concerns? Did it change? What did we come up as the first on the list before? Family. Did that priority change? Does your dynamics, is it different now? Yeah, okay. What are those immediate concerns now, besides the family? Does this make the situation easier or worse? Much worse, isn't it? Okay. The weather. Nice warm summer day. We can camp out on the grass if we need to, right? Pitch the tent, bring out the sleeping bags, we're good. Cold winter, snowy, rainy day, not so much, right? You're at work, family's dispersed. Communication, what's that going to look like? How are we going to get back together? Okay? Do we have not only our plans, but do we have plans? And do we have reunification plans? How are we going to get the kids taken care of? Okay, my wife is having fun as a grandma. Her job on disaster day is going to get hold of all of the elementary school grandkids that we've got in town. Okay, and we did have one down at Discovery, but she's now at ACYI, so that makes it a little bit closer. But her job is to gather up all the little kids and get them back to our place. If she has to walk, she's within walking distance of most all of that to make that happen. Our teenage grandkids have got instructions that they walk, they get home as quickly as possible. So we've got a reunification plan, and then my kids can know where to come to pick up their kids in that process. So we need to consider that whole spectrum of possibilities and circumstances that we may find ourselves. If you're not available to go gather up the kids, who do you have available with you? Do you have some close neighbors? You have other family members that can help you out with this plan. Communications plan. Okay? Chances are, that start scenario, have cell phone service. No. And even if this infrastructure is still in place, are you going to have cell phone service? No. Why? Everybody else is on it. The whole system's going to be jammed. Now, eventually, within time, with the emergency management world, we can work with the cell services and we can prioritize calls so that public safety agencies will be prioritized over anybody else in order to be able to do what we need to do. As we start putting back online the communication systems, did you know that there's a prioritization that they will focus on getting long distance lines back up and running before they worry about local lines? And if that's the case, why is that? Where's the cavalry going to come from in that big situation? Chances are we're going to be needing to get some communication out of state. So guess what your communication plan ought to be? Find out where Aunt Edna lives. Make sure you're in touch with her back in Oklahoma City or wherever she lives in your family. And get her out-of-state number. And make sure every person in your family has Aunt Edna's number. And that she understands that in the case of something, she's going to be that call center for everybody, that you can call in and leave a message or talk to Aunt Edna, say, hey, I'm okay, I'm going to be heading, trying to get back home, if my family tries to call, I'm okay. And everybody else has that responsibility to check in whenever they can to let Aunt Edna know what's happening, so that as people, we can check up on the family and make sure that we're all right and we have some accountability. Because that's a little bit of a stressful situation if you go hours and hours and hours and you don't know how your family's doing, right? Okay, so let's talk about personal and emergency preparedness. And we're going to tie 3 different concepts together that should be able to help you out here. Now, understand when we talk about the typing of incidents, I got down on one end, we got boo-boos. Those are things that happen day to day, right? The kids fall down, scrape their knees. Is that an emergency? Well, can be, okay, right? Maybe we need to have some stitches, something like this here. But those, we got small end of this spectrum. When we work our way across the spectrum, clear up to jihugic incidents, right? And for those of you that we've talked before, jihugic, that's an official emergency preparedness word for great big. Okay? We actually start typing incidents in emergency management. Type 5 incidents are the day-to-day emergencies that we respond to in the response world. Okay? Traffic accidents, domestic calls, barking dog, stolen bike, those types of things. Medical calls, fire calls. It's just those are type 5 incidents. Type 4 incidents are those big day-to-day incidents we occasionally run into in our career. It can be that rolled over tanker full of chemicals. It can be a train derailment. It could be a wildfire that's impacting a community, I mean, those are your type 4 incidents. They're going to stretch us to every end that we've got resources available to have. And we may have to even still bring in a few outside resources. Type 3 incident gets bigger. It's one that automatically we know that is outside of our capabilities of handling. And we're going to have to start bringing in additional resources to assist us out, whatever that is. Okay? Could be air support, could be urban search and rescue teams, more fighters, whatever. Okay? Fatality resources. We move up into type 2 and type 1, and these are things typically we see associated with those big, massive hurricanes that hit in different parts of the country that are going to go across multiple states. We may see wildfires that big. We see them a lot in California because of the significant urban interface. Utah, not so much. Now, on disaster day with an earthquake, we might see a type 2 incident or a type 1 incident. That's going to be if this fault slips and it goes from Box Elder County through Utah County, and it takes every county in between. Because if everybody else is eyeball deep in that same emergency that we are, how much mutual aid assistance are we going to get? Ain't. Okay, because everybody's going to hold on to their resource. If it's just a Box Elder County incident, then it's going to put us into a type 4, type 3 incident, but we're going to be able to get cavalry from down the state. But if they're all eyeball deep in it, we're not going to get any assistance. So that's how it works. And if you see across there, you look at that tiered response. Personal, community level response, county, regional. Let's look at the 6 northern counties here in the region. We have a state response, national. And you get to these type 1, these jihugic incidents, we could potentially have an international response. Have we seen that recently? Anybody follow the fires last summer? Did you see that we were bringing fire teams in from Australia and places like that to help us to fight our fires because we had so many going across this country that we were starting to tap out all the fire resources that we had? And the last piece I want to look at is this threat spectrum. Now, this threat spectrum is the what ifs. We need to consider what ifs. And it's not like we have to run around like Chicken Little and think that we've got the sky is falling, but we need to be realistic about the potentials of things that could happen in our lives and in society that can make our lives more complicated. From that scraped knee on the one end, we got to stop and slow down, help our children or our grandchildren take care of the little boo-boo, and it takes a little bit of time out of us and so forth. Clear up to the other end of the spectrum, which would be a full life extinction event, right? We get hit by that asteroid and there ain't a darn thing anything's going to do about it. But we look at the things somewhere in between here. I've got a series of things that's going to come up on the screen here, and this isn't meant to be any real hard, solid, specific order. There's a lot of dynamics that could move some of these things from one end to another, but I want you to get thinking about the various categories which these types of incidents fall in, okay, and how they may impact you. Okay, so starting down in that lower end, we move up from a scraped knee to a car crash. Well, depending upon the severity of that car crash, it could be a bigger thing or not. How about a heart attack? How about the impact simply of a job loss or something that's going to make it where you can't work? Could that have an impact upon your family? Absolutely. Okay, long-term illnesses, the active shooter situation we talk about, severe weather, okay, hazardous materials, a lot of stuff going down the rails, going down the highway. Flooding is always a potential, right? Depending upon the weather. Fire, terrorism, earthquake, weapons of mass destruction. So those are kind of the ones we really think about a lot. Now you can start looking at this upper end thing, and I would submit to you, the higher we go on this spectrum, hopefully the less of a potential this is, but nevertheless, it's one of those things that we need to be aware of those things. We look at things like a pandemic event. Now we've had a few things with some of these diseases coming out of Africa, and now we're dealing with what, the Zika disease, okay. Well, something amongst our population that hasn't been there before, and we don't have the protections we need. Can it have some dynamics on our population? Anybody familiar with the 1918 Spanish influenza? Took out a third of, okay, 30% mortality rate. What happens if we lose 30% of the people in this country just because of sickness and illness and disease? Have any impact upon how we're doing business? Absolutely. Cyber terror. Now, cyber terrorism, 15 years ago, we probably wouldn't even thought about this here. We was all dreaming about this new internet thing and all the information that was going to come out of this. But you now got screwballs that can now start to mess with other things like our financial circumstances. Not to mention even some of the goofy stuff that the government does with bailouts and things like this here. Is there a potential that we could have a significant fall or shift in financial circumstances in the world? And could that have an impact upon how we live and how we do business? It's there, okay? How about electric grid failure? Right now I'm reading a book that Kevin Potter gave me that it fits in with another book that I've read that identifies a little bit of the vulnerability that lives within our power grid system within this country, looking at some aging and outdated technologies and the potential of cyber terrorists to get in there to try to knock our power grid out from underneath us. And we see these things every once in a while where in the country where you'll have a country where several states will lose power. Now, fortunately, we're able to, within sometimes a couple, 2 or 3 days, or sometimes even a couple of weeks, getting power back on. Now, we're pretty lucky here in Utah. I don't think we've ever seen a situation where anybody's lost power for a couple of weeks, have we? A few hours, okay? But what's that going to do to you? We lose power for a couple of weeks. What does that do to your lifestyle, to your family, being able to take care of them? And you still needing to have that responsibility to go to work every day. How about EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or what they call a coronal mass ejection, solar event that does the same thing, ionizes the atmosphere. EMP would be an intentional man-made event. I would submit pretty difficult for a terrorist, short of a state-sponsored terrorist event, but probably would be more of an act of warfare. And I know that from information that I've read that it certainly probably would be the first step prior to nuclear strikes. You put these EMPs in the atmosphere, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them in strategic places across the country at several miles in the atmosphere. No radiation, doesn't damage anything, it just simply fries all electronic circuitry. And we're not talking about just flipping the power switches back on, we're talking about having to rebuild infrastructure. Puts us back to the Stone Ages. Okay, huge worst case scenario. Hopefully it's a low probability event. But it should get us to be thinking about, again, preparedness. I would submit to you if we've got preparedness capabilities for some of these things down in here on this other end, we're going to get by for a while, even if the worst case thing happens. Okay? And then full out nuclear war. There's a few of you here that are old enough to remember civil defense days, right? Dale? Okay. Okay. Anybody remember history about what's the old civil defense days? The old, yeah, okay, there you go, Cordell, you're old enough. You got a few gray hairs there too. Okay, that's the old Tommy Turtle duck and cover, because we were afraid of the nukes, right? We were afraid of nuclear exchange between us and Russia. And we were taught in elementary school that you take and get underneath your desk and hold on, okay, because that was going to save you from the nuclear, okay? But we grew up in that environment, and we grew up with the mentality of preparedness, of folks having some supplies, and there was people that had bomb shelters and things like that. We kind of lost a little bit of that. And in some of our most urban parts of the world, and I think you've all seen this, we've seen it in Katrina there in New Orleans and so forth, that we've got parts of our culture who are totally reliant upon, well, the government's going to come in and save me. Okay, they're going to come in and take care of us. And we will get some help eventually. But when you look at this spectrum across here on that tiered response, the farther we come this way on that spectrum to get help, the more what does it take? To get here? Time. okay? We have to start reaching nationally and internationally for help. We can be talking days and if not weeks to get all those resources brought in. That's a long time that you're going to have to be on your own, taking care of you and your family, okay, as we deal with some of this stuff. We have an obligation as citizens to build our personal preparedness against these possibilities. And again, I don't know that you have to go clear back and build yourself big nuclear bunkers. I'm not advocating that. But I'm saying that some of the basic preparedness concepts that we can employ in our life should be able to help us out. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. We're not, when you go to the store, buy an extra case of beans and throw them underneath the bed. Okay, another case of water here and there, and just kind of start stacking up some of those resources. Okay, if you got a gas barbecue grill, you're going to have the ability, if something happens, you can't be cooking inside the house. You're going to be able to take and cook for a while. Have a few extra bottles of propane around, and things like that. Okay, personal preparedness for the day when bad things change your world. We're still going to want to be able to take care of our family. That's going to be our number one priority, right? And in reality, it's the same reason why we wear seatbelts. Why do you wear a seatbelt? Are you going to get into an accident every day? Just in case, right? Why do you pay insurance for your cars or your health? Just in case, right? So personal preparedness is just basically a personal preparedness insurance. It's personal family insurance. If we develop that mentality, put a little bit of effort in it. There are scads of information, and we're going to cover some of that. But here's another dynamic. You are a public employee, right? What's that got to do with anything, right? Does it have to do anything with anything? What difference does it make? Guess what? You are the government. Everybody's out there waiting that the government's going to step up and solve the problem. You are a piece of that government. Now, we got some of us in the room that have traditional emergency responder roles, and that's the nature of our job, and we understand that. We may have some of us whose jobs doesn't put us down that role, doesn't put us in that situation. But we got to realize that each and every one has a responsibility somewhere. We're going to talk about that. Okay? We have a greater responsibility to have personal preparedness in our lives so that you can take care of your families, because the toughest thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to give mama a kiss and pat the kids on the head or whatever and say, I am sorry, we've got a tent for you, here's the food, I've got to go to work, I'll check on you as much as I can, okay? Or we get you to grandma's house or whatever the circumstances, whatever your plan is, but you've got to walk away to be able to do your job at some point in time. Now, obviously, if you've got injuries and things like this, you're going to take the time necessary to make sure that family's taken care of. Jenica and I and the commissioners, we had some little bit of discussion about some possibilities that we're looking at. What we can, and in fact, it was interesting, I downloaded this document yesterday, and I was doing a little bit of reading through some of this stuff here, and it's for agencies who have public safety responders, and I'd say anybody that's within the county government, some ideas by which we need to build some capabilities to help you take care of your families. Maybe develop some receiving centers separate from the community shelters at the high school or whatever, right? That we can, if we need to, we pitch tents out here on the south side of the building if we need to, that we can bring family in closer, and we're going to have water and food and things like that. We could potentially leave an empty portion of the facility here of the lesser criminals. That's already been discussed, and there's already protocol in place. That may be a place we may be able to bring family members in if needed. Out of the road shed out here, I thought, they got some big open bays in there. If we was able to even get hold of some camp trailers that we could move in there, that people could get in, get out of the weather, especially in that cold winter season. They're heated enough to where it's above freezing. We could actually build some capabilities to take care of our family. So those will be some things that we're going to be looking at as time rolls forward. Okay, our county preparedness plans. You are going to fit in one of three groups, and I kind of started alluding to this here. You're going to be a responder, and that's typically our police, fire, EMS, our county roads folks fit in that realm. The assessors, anybody from the assessor's office, guess what? We've got a plan for you that you're going to be out there helping us to do assessments on critical key buildings and infrastructures. Before we can open up a school as a shelter, we're going to need to send folks through some of those buildings to look at some of those things. So you're going to have a role out on an operational side of things. Okay, our landfill folks. Anybody here from landfill? I haven't talked to them about it. I want to look at having them as our debris management folks. So we got down trees, down buildings, things, getting routes cleared and things like this, working with the county roads folks, finding places we can manage that debris and take care of it. We have a coordination role. That's going to be here in the EOC. So if you happen to have a job within the county, maybe at the courts, maybe at the motor vehicles office, we're probably not going to be doing court. We're probably not going to be selling license plates on disaster day, right? Well, guess what? Y'all might be part of the team down here, and we're going to end up with some very specific assignments and roles and responsibilities that will help with some of that stuff. And then depending upon that spectrum, we may still find that there's certain key critical government resources that still might need to come into play based upon this spectrum. If it's a full, wide-scale, disastrous type thing, probably not so much. But maybe we've got something farther down that spectrum. Okay, we're still going to have some business open as well, but we still may have to bring in some folks to help with the EOC. So it's a kind of a sliding rule as we go through that there. Now, the idea being is let's look at getting prepared. Now I'm going to take just a second here and show you this website that we've got here. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it. You go to the county website under Emergency Management. There's a couple different ways. You click on Emergency Management, and that's just a general discussion about what emergency management and how that happens and what does it do. And if you need to, you can click in here, and this will give you information about citizens' responsibilities. If you want to learn more about specific hazards and potential disasters, you can click on any one of these, and it'll take you to a website that will give you information about it. Okay? So we have that capability. If you go in through emergency management, just right directly to emergency preparedness, it's going to bring you to some information, and down here we can start looking at some of the links that we can do. Now this here gives you an overview real quick of developing your emergency plans, develop your emergency preparedness kits, establishing a month's supply of food and basic essentials. But here's websites that will take you to that there. We got a Be Prepared Family link for being prepared as a family. We can share this with business owners, how businesses can be prepared. Statistically, 45% of businesses will fail in a large-scale disaster. They'll never open back up. What kind of impact does that have on our community and our finances, our tax bases? It's going to have some impact, right? Be Ready Schools. I'm working with the school district. They're developing plans, and there's programs in place to help the schools be able to interconnect with things that we've got going on. And then Be Ready Community. And you can come down and click on any one of these things and again, get information relative to those. All right? So take some time. This just is a place to start. If you want to get, really kind of waste some time, lose some time. I always call the internet the time vacuum because it's, let's see, what is going to let me do this here? Because you can get in there and lose a lot of time. So we go to that county website and look at some of those things that we've got. Okay, there's much information on the internet, but here's what you want to do. You need to make those plans that we talked about. What is your escape plans? Kids should come home at least once a year having had fire safety training. How are we going to get out of the house if there's a fire, right? Or if there's an earthquake? We want to develop those plans. Where are you going to meet at? You're going to cross the street at the neighbor's house? Where are you all going to meet at? We want to look at your communications plans. Again, as we talked about, how are we going to communicate and talk and coordinate in a disaster? Use Aunt Edna back in Oklahoma City. And what is your reunification plan based on the dynamics of your family and where everybody's at? Okay. You need to develop your 72-hour kits, your emergency kits. Now, they've kind of gotten away from 72-hour kits, but they call them emergency kits. Some places require a little bit more time. Okay. If you live in Alaska, guess what? 72 hours ain't enough. It's a week kit that they teach people they need to have because it's going to take that much longer to get resources out to them. So you develop this emergency kit. And there's a lot of information out there. It's going to be very much dependent upon each individual as to what your needs are. There's health needs, there's medications, there's entertainment needs if you got little kids. But you need to have some basic water and food and everything else. Now, what kind of circumstances would drive us to have that emergency get up and leave kit? So I submit to you, just because we got an emergency or a disaster doesn't mean you have to leave, right? But there are a couple scenarios. Give me one. What's a situation that caused you to have to take and grab that kit by the back door and you hit the car and you leave? Hazmat, okay? Hazmat situation is going to, you get a release of methyl ethyl death downwind, and we got two options based upon the information that's come across. You're going to be either shelter in place, which means this thing's going to move past you quick enough if you just shut everything down, you close your doors and windows, turn off your air conditioning, and let that cloud blow past you. You're probably going to be safer than to try to get out and to extricate yourself in that situation. But if you've got a long-term burning incident and you got stuff that's blowing through town, you know, we evacuated the city of a little town of Mona back in, whatever year, 96, whenever that was. And they were out of their houses for like 3 days before the winds changed with that fire. The fire burnt for 5 days on that track. So that's going to be one of those situations. Somebody mentioned a flood, potential for flooding. If you happen to be right in that flood zone, that could be one of those situations. If your place is going to be compromised, you grab that bag and run. So we need to have that flexibility. I would encourage you to also have your kits in your cars. Now, for the sheriff's office and for the patrol vehicles, we've put an emergency kit together, basic set of stuff. The idea for the deputies is there's potential of being maybe out west, and only because as a trooper years ago, I had one of these moments when Murphy got in the middle of my day and blew a tire out, and my patrol vehicle went and bucket over tea kettle a couple of times. It took 7 hours for the cavalry to find me, and I had a kit, and it gave me a little bit of reassurance. I had some things that I had there to be able to kind of take the edge off of what was already a nasty situation, and I knew that if I was going to be stuck there overnight waiting for the cavalry to find me, I had some resources to help me out. Each one of you should have in the trunk of your car a basic set of this stuff. Now, it's seasonal. You don't have to carry the extra sleeping bag in the summertime, but maybe a couple of light blankets. But in the wintertime, throw a sleeping bag in there or two, especially if you're going on a long trip. You know, when you got 2 or 3 folks in there, you're going to want to have the ability to take care of yourself if your car goes off the road or becomes disabled in cold weather. So those car kits are critical. And maybe even consider having a small kit at work. Depending upon how far you live from your work location, you may be stuck at the office for a day or two. Roads are busted up and structure's such that you're not going to be able to make it home. Before I come to work for the county, I was working for a trucking company in Salt Lake, and it really kind of made me nervous because that's 60 miles. It takes me about an hour when I'm driving, but what happens if we got an earthquake? It could take me a couple of days to get home, couldn't it? The infrastructure's busted up between here and there. So I had a kit in a backpack. If need be, I could dump the vehicle, and I'm going to start hiking home. I was sitting in Azerbaijan doing some work. The last time that, the Lebanese come across the northern border of Israel, and they took some Israeli soldiers captive. I don't know if any of you remember that in the news. I wasn't necessarily directly at a place that was impacted by that, other than I was in that region, and that region being unstable as is, kind of made you a little bit nervous, because if things ever really get ugly and things become destabilized and transportation become an issue, guess what? You can't backpack from Azerbaijan to Utah. It ain't going to happen. Okay, there's a little bit of a pond between us, okay? And it's actually one of the reasons why, over time, I kind of quit taking some of those opportunities to do international work, because, I don't know, when things go bad, I want to be able to make it home, all right? Things to think about. Then take the time to begin to make some extra, store some extra food and some extra water. Okay, start out, aim for a week's supply that you've got stuff to take care of your family. And then you maybe work for a month's supply. Look at getting a 3-month supply. It's kind of interesting in our culture here in the Rocky Mountains and out west, a lot different than those folks in the big cities back east and on the left coast out there. We have a culture of self-reliance, a lot more ingrained into than what a lot of people do. Let's not lose that. Let's add on that ability to be able to have those supplies into place. Okay? So, questions, comments, discussion on this. What do you think? What's some of the thoughts come to your mind as we were looking at this here? No thoughts?
Mine is like looting. You're going to get prepared, but what about the other people that's not prepared?
Okay. Okay, and that's a good question. That's actually one of the problems on our threat spectrum, isn't it? If things go bad, I'm going to be ready, but what about uncontrolled masses and populations? Is that a possibility? Absolutely. Okay, and so you still get prepared. Probably want to keep your mouth quiet about it. Just kind of fly low below the radar, and just be ready to help your family. If you got a few extra cans of beans and you can help a neighbor out, help a neighbor out. I don't have a bit of problem with that. But personal protection certainly becomes an issue in that situation. Looking at being able to do that. I'm going to submit to you, especially if you've got a large situation, electricity out, EMP, whatever, long-term type of thing. We're going to have to move back to very close, tight-knit, sub-community type operations to pull together with folks of like minds and values to be able to cover each other's backs and establish the footprint and the strength in the foreground to be able to offset the mobs that'll be there. Okay, and hopefully we're just far enough away from the goofballs in the other states that we can fend them off. Now what's interesting is I was going to bring it in here. There's that book, 1 Second After. It deals with the EMP. Whether you believe in the EMP issue or not, whether it's as big a deal as he thinks it is or not, the thing that's fabulous about that book is the guy very effectively describes the social degradation that will happen in that kind of a situation, and he identifies some very key points that will be critical in being able to work through a situation. And he deals with the mobs and so forth, and it's through a community that has some geographical capabilities of protectionism and isolation. Okay, so let's look at Box Elder County. We got a little bit of a pinch point here between Rocky Point and the Bay. Okay, that works to our fans. Got a big wide open northern border, but I don't see too many Idahoans come running in. So we've got some potentials. But I would submit to you that still it would be even just within neighborhoods that you would kind of watch each other's back in some of those situations until services get restored. Because you get a circumstances, you get a disaster big enough, that quick, there isn't enough law enforcement in the county to be able to be positioned to take care of every neighborhood and every community, is there? Okay, folks are going to have to develop some capabilities to be able to do some of this stuff. Other thoughts? What do you think? We got a few preppers in here, right?
On that same note, it's a pretty well-known fact, folks. A lot of you crazies live in the city because of just this reason. They're not going to prep. When it goes down, they're coming to your house. So the self-protection thing has got to be there. Because us guys that do that for a living are not going to be able to get to every house quick. You've got to be able to take care of yourself. And that's really only going to happen on the big ones. The small ones, nothing. But the big one that's going to shut things down for days, that's when that's going to happen. I'm not trying to be an advocate of anything to say with any kind of weaponry, but you need to have something. You need to know how to use it. You need to be able to use it, because that will happen. I've had personal talks with several people that I know this being a fact. That's why they live in the communities. They don't live out in the country like I do, by themselves, because they can't take care of themselves. They're planning on taking care of themselves by you.
Yep.
And it will happen.
And the protection, yeah. And protection comes not only from weaponry, but also in numbers. Again, like-minded people pulling together, a neighborhood pulling together. You might set some folks on 24-hour security watch for that neighborhood, and be ready to bang the pans if need be if we start to see some goofy things going on. Now, it's things we hate to think about, okay? I'd love to go through life and think that nothing could ever bad go happen, but is it going to happen? I don't know. Is it possible? Anything's possible, okay? But we're talking about pretty far down the end of the spectrum. Let's go back to the basics, and that is at least have some basic capabilities to take care of us: food, water, basic supplies. We can take care of our families and work with our neighborhoods to take care of ourselves. Now, on the 23rd and 24th of September at the fairgrounds, we're going to have a Northern Utah Emergency Preparedness Expo. I've been working with the state. We're going to take some pages out of their book, working with emergency managers from the communities throughout the county. We're going to bring in vendors. We're going to bring in displays. We're going to bring in classes. It'll be a public safety show and tell too. We can bring all of our goodies out. We're going to bring in helicopters. I'm going to bring in National Guard. We want to develop a big splash on this, and we're going to work to get the word out throughout all the communities to get folks in, okay? Because I'm going to submit to you that probably the biggest battle that we have in our culture today is apathy, okay? Now, if you go talk to a person on the East Coast or the Gulf Coast or a person that lives in Tornado Alley, guess what? They've got a little bit different attitude about personal preparedness than what we do. Why is that? They've been through it, and what's? High potential. They've been through it year after year after year in some way or another. Okay, they're right down. So why do we have such an issue here in Utah? We just don't have it that often, In fact, I was with the school district in Emmetsburg here back in October, and we were there with a school district from Oklahoma and a school district from Alabama. And so you're there that first day getting to know each other and saying, okay, so Alabama, what kind of disasters and problems do you might face as a school district? Well, in this year we had this hurricane, and in these years we had these tornadoes, and on this year we had a hurricane and a tornado and so forth, and they can go right down through time. They went to Oklahoma. All right, Oklahoma School District, tell us about some of the things that you face. Well, we had these the tornadoes on these days, and we had these days, and this river, got out and flooded by, umpteen miles and so forth, because back there into that flatland, when a river goes up 1 foot, it goes out miles, So they talk about that stuff. They say, all right, Utah, what about all your disasters? We go, we had a flood back in '93. Didn't got the creek run over a little bit. We had to put out some sandbags. And they looked at us, go, what? But it's the reality of our world, and as a result, it creates a little bit of a challenge of apathy, because we talk about preparedness and nothing ever happens. And hopefully we live our whole life and nothing ever happens. But if we're prepared and it does happen, then we're dialed in. So anyway, any other comments, thoughts, questions? It's not meant to be that the sky's falling. I really don't believe it is. Emergency manager, I don't believe the sky's falling. I think we got good things ahead of us. But we just need to just have that insurance, just like you pay your car insurance and you put your seatbelt on every day. Some time, build some personal preparedness capabilities if you don't have it already. Anything else? That's all I've got. Thanks for coming.